Conservative Democratic Senator Joe Manchin has signaled that he will not, in fact, support his own party's agenda in the budget proposal that was just passed in the Senate in the form of a resolution. So the resolution is a blueprint. It's not the final piece of legislation. The resolution is something that luckily every Democratic senator just voted in favor of, which means that we finally got past another obstacle in regard to the $3.5 trillion plan. Now, Manchin did vote in favor of it. However, immediately after voting in favor of it, he said, look, there are some issues here. There are issues that impact my corporate donors. I don't like it. So he doesn't say that explicitly, but that's what's implied. Manchin provided a key vote over unanimous Republican opposition to approve the blueprint, which allows Senate Democrats to create an expansive package that they hope will fund climate change, healthcare, and education measures while increasing taxes on wealthy people and corporations. But this is what's important, less than 4 hours after he voted in favor of this, Manchin issued a statement declaring, quote, serious concerns about the grave consequences facing West Virginians and every American family if Congress decides to spend another $3.5 trillion. Oh, are you worried about how that's gonna affect West Virginians? Is Manchin really concerned about that? Or is Manchin concerned about his own political future? Is he concerned about his corporate donors, the billionaires that he has meetings with, like the billionaires he was talking to when he was trying to entice them to bribe his fellow Republican colleagues to work with him to give the American people the illusion of bipartisanship. Now, Manchin doesn't care about West Virginians. There, I said it. Because the $3.5 trillion proposal that he's now speaking out against would overwhelmingly benefit the lives of West Virginians, and not just West Virginians, of working Americans. It's not the New Deal. I'm not going that far, and anyone who claims it is a clown, because there are no systemic changes in that proposal. However, there's quite a bit of funding to the tune of $3.5 trillion that would help families, that would help elderly people, that would help individuals who don't have health care right now. It would expand Medicare to cover more people. Medicare would be more robust and it would cover more of what people need covered, like dental care, for instance. I mean, how is he gonna argue that West Virginians wouldn't benefit from that legislation? Obviously, he's lying. What is he really worried about? Well, he's worried about the pay-fors. He's worried about raising taxes on the privileged, on the wealthy, on the corporations, the very people who, some years pay nothing in federal taxes and in fact, even receive a refund. So let me give you more. So the blueprint now heads to the House. And we'll see what happens in the House. They will take up, they'll actually return to the Capitol earlier than expected. They're on recess right now, but they're planning on coming back by August 23rd to take up this measure. Now, it would pave the way, as I mentioned, to expand Medicare to include dental, health, and vision benefits. It would also fund a host of climate change programs, which we clearly desperately need right now. It would provide free kindergarten and community college. I'm sure the fine people of West Virginia have no interest in that, no interest in free pre-kindergarten or community college. I'm sure they have no interest in, if they have Medicare, of Medicare being expanded to cover more of their needs. I'm sure they have no interest in that. I mean, Joe Manchin, speaking on behalf of West Virginians, would know better than I would, right? West Virginians want no help at all. I mean, they're suffering in poverty right now, but they don't want any of this. Joe Manchin knows better. Senator Bernie Sanders explained why this legislation is so important. Listen.
People want a government which represents all of us and not just the few. And this legislation is going to ask the wealthiest people in our country to start paying their fair share of taxes so that we can address the needs of working families, the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor. And despite what some of my Republican colleagues may be saying, no one in America who makes less than $400,000 a year will pay a nickel more in federal taxes. In fact, what we are looking at in this budget proposal is an historic tax cut for working families and the middle class.
I love what Senator Sanders said there. But remember, he specifically cited Republican colleagues. Republicans are not part of the equation on this $3.5 trillion proposal. This is something that's gonna pass through reconciliation, meaning that it will pass, or it can pass, with a simple majority in the Senate. And the Senate is split 50-50, meaning that if every Democrat votes in favor of it, Kamala Harris, the vice president, can come in and break the tie, and it gets passed in the Senate. The attention should be focused on the likes of Joe Manchin and other corporate Democrats in the Senate. People like Kyrsten Sinema, Mark Warner, John Tester, I mean, the list goes on and on. These are people that we should be worried about. People who want to stand in the way of passing this legislation because it includes tax increases for the rich. And that's what Manchin's concerned about. He's not concerned about West Virginia. Oh, this is gonna hurt West Virginians. No, it's not. He knows it's not. He's worried it's gonna hurt his donors, and then, of course, in turn, negatively affect him and his political career. Homeboy's already fundraising for his re-election campaign. He needs those donors. Does he need West Virginians? Apparently not. Because he's speaking on their behalf and telling the American people that West Virginians don't want a fairer system, that West Virginians don't want help with childcare, with elder care, with Medicare. It's fascinating, fascinating stuff. By the way, Joe Manchin, just want to remind you of a story we did last week. He benefits handsomely off of our inaction on climate change. In fact, he makes $500,000 a year from one of the dirtiest coal plants in West Virginia. And yes, that's more than twice his salary as a US Senator. We should also take a look at who funds Joe Manchin. That's super relevant to this story. So this is from Open Secrets, and it shows his fundraising from 2015 to 2020. And if you can see there, the vast majority of his contributions come from large individual contributors. Okay, so more than $5.6 million, 58% of his campaign donations come from large individual donors. Then you have PACs, small dollar donors. Oh, would you look at that? Only 4.02% of his campaign donations come from small donors. I wonder why. As someone who feels confident speaking on behalf of West Virginians, it's kind of weird that such a small portion of his fundraising comes from individuals. Weird, really weird. You would think that as a man who has his finger on the pulse for West Virginians, they would provide more funding for his elections, his re-election campaigns. But it looks like he's mostly funded by big industry. Let me give you some more examples. If Manchin runs for re-election in 2024, which he will likely face challenges from both the right and from his left, as some progressive Democrats hope to replace him with one of their own. His primary campaign has already begun fundraising and clocked in with roughly $638,000 through the end of September 2020. Now, who has been funding him? Like specific companies? Well, remember, the $3.5 trillion budget proposal includes funding for climate action. You don't like that. The American Chemistry Council, whose members include companies like Shell and Exxon, spent $200,000 to support Manchin in his 2018 campaign. It's a lot of money. Seems like he cares a lot about what they think. Much of that cash came from PACs affiliated with oil and natural gas companies, including Valero Energy Corporation, National Fuel Gas Company, and DTE Energy, which have long supported Manchin's political career. Those are his buddies, he's looking out for them. But he won't say that publicly. He'll just tell you what West Virginians want when it's the opposite of what they're actually saying. Also, only 2 industries, securities and investment, and lawyers and law firms, contributed more to Manchin throughout his career. And some of these campaign contributions are provided through law firms to help hide the industries or the individuals helping to fund his campaign. So when you see lawyers or law firms as one of the top contributors, that's what's really going on. This is all to say that Joe Manchin isn't speaking out against important legislation because he's worried about bipartisanship. He's also not worried about being a Democratic lawmaker in a red state like West Virginia. When you look at polling, every poll over and over again shows that the majority of Americans, ordinary Americans, are in favor of Biden's original infrastructure proposal, which got cut down to the corporate handout bill that the bipartisan infrastructure bill represents right now. But all of those positive provisions that the majority of Americans want, that's now in the budget proposal. And Joe Manchin telling us that ordinary Americans don't want that and that it's harmful to them is honestly laughable when you take a good hard look at what really motivates him and what really drives his commentary on this legislation. Sure, he's worried about re-election, but not because he's running in a red state. He's worried about re-election because the very people who made him, who have given him a political career, his corporate donors, don't want him to support a bill that would increase taxes on corporations and the wealthy. That's what's really at play. And if anyone in the media tells you otherwise, they're lying to you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.